Every contractor that does work generally knows that you cannot lien a publicly owned property. Okay, if it is government owned, whether it be local, state, municipal, federal, you cannot lien it. Okay, there's usually a payment and performance bond that is on the property. So keep that in mind. There are a couple of areas that you need to pay attention to in particular when you're doing liens. How many of you do condominium work? Okay, a few of you. If you're doing condominiums, be very careful, and I will tell you why. Because condominium liens are incredibly tricky. The condominium statute is under Chapter 718, and there is very little case law or statutory authority actually interpreting what you need to do in order to have a lien on a condo. Okay? If you are improving the common elements, okay, Chapter 718 says that if a declaration of condominiums has been recorded, which it almost always has if you've got a contract with a condo association, you cannot lien the property straight out. Okay, you can only lien for each unit owner's pro rata share of the common elements. So how do you go about preparing that lien? Well, it's a little tricky, and I tell you, I've had a lot of sleepless nights preparing condo liens. You have to put in there the legal description of what the condo is, and then you specifically say, per the unit owner's pro rata share of the common elements. One thing you need to keep in mind is be as specific as possible and keep it as narrowly tailored as possible. I spent a lot of time crafting and trying to figure out the best way to discuss a condominium lien as far as what you're going to lien and the work that you perform. Another thing to keep in mind is tenant improvements. If you're doing tenant improvements, especially commercial tenant improvements, build-outs, be aware of the no lien provision contained in lease agreements. Okay? There will be a lease agreement that is recorded, or a lease notice of no lien that's recorded in the public records. Check the public records before you start doing tenant improvements, because if one of those warnings or one of those notices is in the public records, you will not be able to lien the landlord for the tenant's improvement. Okay, so it's a little tricky. So condominiums and leases, just remember, if you take anything away from the seminar, they are very, very tricky, and spend even more time than you would normally preparing those liens. I mentioned before that you cannot lien public property. There's one exception to that. Okay, let's say you are a contractor, let's say you're doing roadway and utility work for a public entity, and you're out and you are doing some utility hookups, and you actually improve some private property as a result, okay, with the owner's consent. That work, that specific amount of work that you did for the private property could potentially be lienable. Okay, so that's an exception as well. Now let's turn to the notice of commencement. The notice of commencement is in 713.13. This is the current form. I've got it on 2 pages. Your permitting authority will have a copy of this, and 9 times out of 10, no matter where you're doing work in Florida, you're required to have an NOC in order to get the permit. So keep that in mind. Why is the notice of commencement important? Well, the notice of commencement is important for a variety of different reasons. First is that it contains all the information that you will need in order to know who to serve your lien notices on. Okay, it's got the contractor's name, the owner's name, the description of the property. It will list a surety if there is one. Remember, if you have a surety, you're not in the lien context, you're in the surety context, payment and performance bond. It will have the lender's name and information on there, and other pertinent and key information. So when you are working, let's say you're a subcontractor and you're working for a prime, pull the prime's NOC, notice of commencement. Okay, you can get it online. It is recorded. If you can't get it there, then check the permitting office or check the job box. It should be on site.